Hello and welcome to Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. Today our special guest is Scott Wharton, and he is the CEO of Tandem PV. Hey Scott, does that mean like every piece of tandem style PV, you're the CEO of like every different company that's making tandem PV? Is that right?
We're like the Coca-Cola. We came up with the name that ended up being the category.
Oh yeah? Oh, so you guys came up with the name Tandem PV. Were you riding a tandem bike when you figured it out?
Close. Our co-founder was at Stanford doing his PhD, and he actually created the world's first tandem solar panel about a dozen years ago.
Wow. Okay. Maybe you could tell us how you do that, how you take like some kind of bicycle with two seats on it, smush it together with a solar cell, and then out comes the greatest thing anybody ever invented.
Yeah, so we're using this new technology called the Perovskite, good for dinner party conversations, to name that. And it's basically a new material science that is better and cheaper. It's actually 200 times thinner than an existing solar panel. It doesn't use any rare earth metals, minerals, or mining. So we kind of mix it in our laboratory in California, and then we can make it in the US. And because it's so thin and doesn't really use any of these rare elements, it's actually better and cheaper. So what we do is we basically take a lot of the elements of an existing solar panel. And if I oversimplify it, it's kind of two pieces of glass. You have these silicon cells that everyone has seen, and like glue. What we do is we coat the top glass, this 1 micron thick layer. So we add 2 grams to a huge solar panel. All the ink that we provide from perovskites could fit into the size of a blueberry.
Wow.
And that adds 30 to 50% more power to a solar panel. So why does that matter to the people listening? I would say density and efficiency are everything in terms of lowering the cost of your deployment, because most of the costs today are not in the solar panel anymore. They're in the labor, the land, the balance of systems. So if you could shrink that by 30 to 50%, you actually get a cheaper solar deployment. So as we're racing to get cheaper and more affordable energy, we're kind of leading the charge to have like the cheapest solution out there, cheaper than anything.
Great. Okay, so there's different ways of putting different layers onto a solar cell. How is it that you're doing it that's different from, say, there's the old Sanyo heterojunction technology where they had like a different layer of amorphous silicon and silicon?
Yeah, so we're basically building a solar panel sandwich. So we're not building out the silicon cells. So there are different kinds of technology. They're called things like PERC and TOPCon and HJT. Those are all different silicon technologies. And what we would do is we would take these silicon cells, kind of make them as a bottom layer. And then we have a top layer that's just kind of coating the glass. So it's a thin film technology, similar if people are listening to First Solar, which is the leader in the US for thin film, except they're using a technology called cadmium telluride. That does about 19% and change. What we do is by having this layer on the glass and having silicon cells, we can capture a lot more light. So we announced that we broke 30% on a solar panel.
I saw that. Yeah, I was reading PV Magazine and I saw that.
Yeah. So 30% is a huge change and breakthrough compared to what's out there today. A traditional silicon panel will do about 22. So by having these different layers, that allows us to basically get a much higher level of efficiency to lower the overall cost.
Yeah, so you're like catching different parts of the spectrum of light and all that. So that's kind of neat. So with the perovskite, is it more on the blue side of the light spectrum, whereas silicon is more on the red side?
It's more that perovskites captures most of the visible light and silicon captures more of the infrared. So because our solar panel layer is so thin, like I said, 1 micron thick, it is semi-transparent. So we can kind of basically let through the other light. And then the perovskite actually does a better job of not only capturing the light, but providing more power. So it's kind of a balance of all those things.
Great. So is this something that we can get right now?
Not quite yet. So where we are today is the company's been around for about 10 years. So it really is a very difficult, deep tech technology. We have a factory running here in California that can build large scale panels, but we're really about to sell them in the next month or two to customers to basically prove out that the technology works. And then we're going to be raising another round of funding to build a high volume line. But we're not talking that far away. It's really early 28 is our target for high volume commercial availability. But we'll start selling them sometime this year. And again, our focus is utility scale, commercial utility scale deployments, which really is, I think listeners know, is almost all going today to data center AI applications.
Great. I noticed that you have a famous person that's on your board. And so that was Jennifer Granholm, and she's the former U.S. Secretary of Energy and former governor of Michigan. Did you get her to be on your board?
I did.
Since you're the CEO?
Yeah, I like to call her the Steph Curry of energy.
Decide not to use it. Curry, way downtown. Bang!
Because she's a superstar.
Yeah, sure.
It's great validation for us. Great to have her with her perspective and experience on our board.
Great. Yeah. And I'm sure that she can probably open some doors and things for you too. So people could start to get your solar cells. Do you say solar cells, or are you selling the whole solar module, or how does that work?
We're selling the entire panel.
So you're selling the entire solar panel, and that includes silicon solar cells. And then the perovskite is on the glass?
Yeah, so the perovskite is underneath the top glass.
Oh, it's underneath the glass.
And then there's kind of an abstraction layer between them, and then the silicon cells are kind of in the package. So then we seal it all up. So obviously, you don't want to have water and air inside. You need to make it last 25, 30 years. Part of our secret sauce is being able to show not only the high performance, but we're already at less than 1% degradation a year based on our accelerated testing. And now we're getting it out in the field to kind of validate that with more external testing. And I think it's probably an important point that we do sell to independent power producers. So most of our customers today, I would say, are the ones, they're multi-billion-dollar, multi-gigawatt companies, but a lot of the data center companies, I think, prefer to buy through these IPPs. So typically, we don't today sell directly to the data center owners, although we could, but most of our customers are the ones deploying this power.
Great. Yeah, everybody's talking about data centers these days. I'm also wondering, when you connecting the silicon solar cells through the perovskite, how is that connection working? Because you probably have different nominal voltages for the different technologies.
Yes, we line them up together to make it a single package. So we do these two layers, and then we integrate them together. So for the person who's deploying it, it actually looks like just a single solar panel, same size, just higher wattage and different, obviously voltages and so on, but matching them up so that we can have it look like a drop-in replacement.
So on a typical solar module, there's something like 72 solar cells in series. And is it the same amount of solar cells in series?
It's a little bit different. And then we have the silicon cells, which have their own electrical properties. And then we have our perovskite ones that are different. So basically, we're matching them together. We're doing voltage matching. And then we wire them together to basically provide a unified output to, typically to an inverter.
Oh, that's interesting. So the nominal voltage of each technology is going to be different per cell. I'm not sure what perovskite is. So you're going to have a certain ratio of silicon cells to perovskite cells?
That's right. So they have very different properties, but when we line them up together, our target panel is going to be closer to a kilowatt in size.
Wow.
From output, which is pretty extraordinary.
Yeah, and so you're getting up to, 30% efficient for a solar cell. That's pretty incredible. Do you ever think about putting a third layer of something else?
We do. I mean, I think there's a possibility. So today, the theoretical limit is 45% for 2 layers. So we're at 30.4, but we have a lot of room to improve. In fact, we've identified improvements to get to 36% without any scientific breakthroughs. If you do a third layer, the theoretical limit gets to 50. In theory, these are 1 micron thick layers. You can add more. There's just more R&D required to have more layers. But that's part of why it's exciting, is that you can kind of keep adding 2 layers, maybe 3 over time to continue to increase the output.
And so that would just be multiple layers of the same technology of perovskite?
Yeah, I mean, the way I describe it today is our strategy is like a Toyota Prius approach. We're doing the hybrid between perovskite and silicon. And part of why we're doing that is silicon it just works. It's kind of bulletproof. Over time, our plan would be to engineer out the silicon and have 2 or even 3 layers of perovskite.
Wow. Okay, great. And I noticed from the announcement on PV Magazine, where you got up to 30.4%, that you're using Maxeon integrated back contact silicon solar cells.
Yeah, we work with Maxeon for that trial, but we are agnostic to this underlying silicon. So we can kind of work with everyone. Maxeon's been a great partner to do that, but we're not tied to them. We could basically work with any of the companies or technologies that are out there.
Okay, yeah, and I remember Maxeon, they split off from SunPower, making the solar cells and the solar modules. And SunPower, if you go back 20 years, they were way ahead of everybody else. They had the best technology that there was for making solar cells.
Yeah, in fact, the former CEO of SunPower is an investor in the company. The guy who ran their manufacturing for 8 years, Greg Reichow, he led our investment in our A round. He's on the board. So we have a whole bunch of SunPower alums who are part of our team.
Awesome. Yeah, I had Dick Swanson on the podcast, and we'll put a link to that in the show notes. He's not involved, is he? I think he's retired.
He's not, but he was at our ribbon cutting, and he's a big fan of what we're doing.
Yeah, very cool and very modest guy. Everybody gives him credit for Swanson's law, and he tries to say, oh, I really don't deserve credit for inventing the back contact solar cell. He's like, oh, sort of, but I don't deserve credit. He's always looking for some excuse to not take credit for what he did.
Yeah, he's an amazing, and we all owe a lot to him.
Yeah, I know. He's like one of those solar superheroes. We interrupt you for a very important announcement. Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast has been brought to you by Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. That's right, Sean White is sponsoring his own podcast, and he wants to remind you to go check out some of his classes. You can go to SolarSEAN, that's solar, SEAN.com, and then click on the links to check out his classes. You can check out his heat spring classes, and you can also hire him to teach classes for you, like at your company, something like that. Now back to the show. And so are you looking at mostly utility scale projects?
We are. Yeah, that's our focus. And not surprisingly, because a lot of the demand is with AI and data centers. So we're trying to help solve that problem, both making it cheaper, but also making it more available here in the US.
And so I believe that you're working in Silicon Valley. Is that where the factory is right now?
Yeah, we're trying to rename it Perovskite Valley, but yes, currently we're in Silicon Valley in Fremont.
Yeah, or you put a layer of perovskite over Silicon Valley. That'll be a good idea. And so what are the benefits to being in the tech capital of the world? I guess, there's all the data center people. It's probably great for getting funding and all that kind of stuff. Venture capitalists and all your connections. I guess you've been in the tech industry before the solar industry.
Yeah, so I'm a startup junkie. This is my 5th startup scale-up in a row. I was lucky. I did 2 early stage companies in the voice over IP telecom space that both went public. Then I started the world's first cloud video conferencing service, which is how I met our mutual friend, Scott Charter. Shout out to him in the data center space. Sold that. And then after 3 startups in a row, my wife said, would you mind not doing another one for a while? So I went to Logitech, basically built the world's biggest video conferencing hardware business. So before I came here, I was running a $2 billion global manufacturing business. Part of why I think it's exciting to be in Silicon Valley is just the incredible talent. So obviously, there are a lot of people know us for software engineers, but we found some of the best manufacturing talent in the world, which is probably not as well known, but there's just a great number of people who still know how to do manufacturing, especially around solar.
Great. And so as you scale up and start making, all the solar in the world that covers all of Perovskite Valley and all that kind of stuff, are you looking at putting factories in different places?
For the most part, another thing that would be counterintuitive to people listening is that I think there is this myth that the IRA was repealed. And it's actually not true. There were a bunch of the consumer tax credits that went away, but the manufacturing tax credits, the so-called 45X for clean manufacturing, they're still around until 2032. And then there are domestic tax credits, including a bonus for 10% for deploying US-based manufacturing. So believe it or not, the US is actually the cheapest place in the world right now to do solar manufacturing. So we're planning on committing and being a leader in doing local US manufacturing.
Awesome. That's good to know. Like a lot of people are just all depressed and they're like, oh, they got rid of the tax credit. And that's just the residential tax credit where like if a person owns their own system on their roof, so it could be somebody else putting a system on their roof and owning it with third-party ownership. And, any kind of commercial, if you own a business, you could put it on and you can own it. Your business can own it. And at least for a while longer. And then, of course, there's all these manufacturing tax credits. And a lot of people kind of overlook that part. So that's pretty neat. And then another thing, too, is they can renew the tax credits. They've always renewed them over time. So no saying that they won't already.
That's true. It goes to 2032. There is a Republican bill being offered right now. We'll see if it passes now or later. That would extend the tax credits for another 5 or 6 years. It is bipartisan that we want in the U.S. local manufacturing. We want energy security. So I think what we're playing into is a theme that is bipartisan, that we want to have local advanced manufacturing jobs and we want to have energy security. And I think we're proud to be a part of that.
Yeah. And I noticed too that the Solar Energy Industry Association, SEIA, the big trade group for the industry, solar and storage and everything, they just got a new director that is a Republican, like a former governor.
Yeah, Tim Pawlenty. Yeah, I think it shows that, also the other thing I think most people don't know is solar today in the US is mostly being deployed in states that voted for the Republicans. Mm-hmm. Texas is actually the biggest state right now deploying solar, but it's also places like Mississippi and Arkansas and Arizona and other places. And not surprisingly, that's where a lot of the data centers are being built. So I think there's a lot of synergy between what's happening in the solar industry in the US and data centers. In fact, over 90% of all new energy in the US this year is solar and batteries and wind. It's actually not fossil fuels. So that's another myth that's out there.
Yeah, we got to stop all these myths. Yeah, I think it's important to get, people on our side instead of trying to scold them into believing things they don't believe in.
Yeah, and also get them up to speed. I think what I tell a lot of people is the information they had was true 2 years ago, but now it's just wrong. And solar is not winning because of environmental reasons. The people in Texas and other places, why are they deploying it? Capitalism. Just cheaper and more available. And probably a lot of people here listening is gas turbines have a 5-year backlog, and that's if you can get a pipeline brought to your project. So gas is a great transition fuel, but it's challenging to get. Solar and batteries you can get a lot easier. You can get it in months or not 5 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so are you working on developing projects at all, or are you mostly just making the solar panels?
Yeah, I mean, our customers are really doing the development of projects, so we don't feel like we need to. There are a whole bunch of great companies that have that skill set. So our focus is really being a technology company and pushing the envelope on performance and cost.
Yeah. So are you working with other companies besides NABCEP right now?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we're working with a whole bunch of them on the underlying silicon cell technology. Like I said, it's a real advantage technically that we're not tied to any one. So we have the ability to be agnostic to them. And what that means is both building our own panel and kind of buying the cells, but also potentially if there's a silicon maker around the world, we could sell them the Perovskite top layer to kind of boost up their performance.
Okay. And what does that look like, the Perovskite tight layer? Is it just a roll of something?
It's a thin film put on glass. So we're using similar technologies to make TVs or windows. We're just applying a very thin substrate, the 1 micron layer thick. Just to give you a sense of it, it's 1/100th the width of a human hair. It's super thin. And we put that on the top glass. And that sounds easy, but it's actually quite hard. It's really a physics, metallurgy, material science, chemistry, like all these different technologies rolled into one problem, which is why it's so hard to pull off. But at the end of the day, it's thinner and cheaper. It really is this breakthrough that is going to transform solar to make it's the cheapest source today, but it will continue to drive down the cost curve and make it even cheaper for all of us.
So you're putting it onto glass, and it's the size of a blueberry per 1,000-watt solar module, I guess, approximately, something like that. And there's got to be electrical connections in there. Are the electrical connections somehow traced on the glass? Is it sort of like making a computer chip?
It's more like making a TV, like an OLED TV. So we have cells where we basically put these laser lines on the top, and then the silicon cells on the bottom, and then we string them together. We use typical module assembly technology, which is pretty low tech and off the shelf to kind of make them one single electrical property to the people who are deploying it. And then we basically design them to be the same size to put them in standard trackers. Even though it has a lot more power and it's using a different material science, we're trying to make it basically a drop-in replacement. So if you're already deploying solar, this is just a better mousetrap.
Great. We interrupt this podcast for a very important announcement. This podcast was brought to you by Magic Solar Crystals, turning sunlight into energy. And how do you join the perovskite to the silicon? Like, there's got to be some place where they're wired together.
Yeah, we'll use a junction box and then typical stringing together to combine them into one single logical solar panel, even though the two layers don't touch each other.
Yep. And is it monofacial, I guess, because you have the back contact cells that you're working with, but I guess could it be bifacial?
Absolutely. I mean, with the NABCEP stuff aside, most of the technologies we're working with are inherently bifacial. So when we say 30.4%, that excludes the bifaciality. So you can get, another 5, 6, 7% potentially from the back.
Okay. And when you're doing bifacial, would you have another layer of perovskite on the back?
Not necessarily. It could really just be silicon. That a lot of the silicon cells are inherently bifacial. Maxian's not, but others are.
Yeah. So like, let's say that you have like a bifacial solar module and there's glass on the front and glass on the back. Would you put perovskite on the front and the back?
No, typically we would put it just on the top for now, although it's possible. It would add to the complexity, but we could in the future maybe do it. Right now, we're just leveraging the silicon that's on the back for the bifaciality.
And it's so thin. How do you even see it? Do you look at it with a microscope or something?
It is semi-transparent. It has like a brownish tint. You mean, how do we like look at it from an analytics point of view?
Yeah.
Or just how do you see it?
What would it look like? Like if you go down there and look really close at the glass?
It would look very similar to another first solar panel where it has a thin film layer. It looks more like a black. If you look at it without the silicon in the back, it looks kind of this brownish orange tint. If you look at it when it's got the silicon panels on the back, it basically looks black. So it'll look like an all black solar panel.
Yeah. Okay. So like the first solar cells, they're just stripes. Is it stripes?
We're going to look almost the same.
Okay. So just these real thin little stripes, but they're transparent.
That's right.
Okay. Pretty neat. And so when you're putting those it's so thin, and I think you even called it ink. So it's more like an ink printer. That's why they call it thin film. It's not like a real crystal. How many times thinner than silicon?
200.
200. And silicon is so thin, it's just hard to imagine.
That's right.
200 times thinner than silicon. And it's sort of, I guess, is it like an inkjet printer type of process?
In a way, yeah. It's like an inkjet process that lays down a very thin and uniform layer. And there are a bunch of layers. There are conductive layers and insulating layers, but all of them add up to 1 micron.
Wow.
So the perovskite layer is even thinner than that.
Wow. So I think it's probably good to be in Silicon Valley because they know how to make things really small, like when they're making computer chips.
That's right. At the end of the day, a solar panel is a semiconductor. So being in Silicon Valley, not that surprising how to make a new kind of semiconductor.
And it's got to be, yeah. And when you make it, are you going to go robotic with all this stuff?
A lot of our factory today is automated and using robots. So one of the reasons why we compete effectively is that the amount of labor that you need is relatively small on the factory line. And almost all of what we're showing today, we did a ribbon cutting a few months ago. And we were showing basically it's almost all automated where the glass just kind of moves through the line end to end.
And so that's a great way to be able to compete with places where labor is super cheap.
That's right.
Yeah, great. So where do you suggest people get a hold of you and get a hold of some Tandem PV from Tandem PV?
We can go to tandempv.com. You could go visit me at LinkedIn. And then my email address, scott@tandempv.com, if anyone wants to drop me a line.
Yeah, I'd love to see your factory someday.
You should come by. I think you'd enjoy it.
Okay, I'll do that. Yeah, I'm not too far away. So I'm in a redwood forest in the East Bay.
Okay, we'd love to have you.
Great. Yeah, and I'm building a solar training center. If you wanted to, show off your stuff here too, that would be awesome.
Yeah, we should talk about that. That sounds great.
Let's do it. So yeah, maybe I'll swing by next time I'm down that way and check it out and we'll figure stuff out.
I'm giving tours almost every week now, so love to add you to the list.
So you have a list. Let's do it. Okay, great.
Well, informally, I think about it. In the US, we're very software oriented. We're not used to seeing factories, let alone in advanced manufacturing factories. So I think for a lot of people who come by, part of what they like about it, one is just having that experience, but seeing how sophisticated our manufacturing process is. It's using a lot of standard processes, but the way we do it is, it's kind of foreign to a lot of Americans, but I love showing it to people because it shows it, the US, we can do advanced manufacturing. China isn't the only one who can do it, and we can win.
Yeah. So like a lot of things were invented in Silicon Valley. In fact, our mutual friend, Scott Charter, is a deadhead, and the Grateful Dead were invented in Silicon Valley too. Are you also a deadhead? Or
I'm not. I like other things. And I can't compete with Scott on being a deadhead. I know he's like, I can't even imagine how many shows he's seen.
Yeah, when I first met him, he was just like, how many shows have you seen? I've seen like Jerry 100 and something times. I'm like, I've only seen him 50. So
only 50? Yeah, you're a slacker.
I know. I'm just, and I can't even catch up. So
no.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Scott Wharton, CEO of Tandem PV, for being on the podcast. I really enjoyed talking to you. Let's do it again anytime. Go ahead and sign up and we can put you on the podcast again. And it's been a great conversation, and I'm going to contact you about touring the factory.
Sounds great. Thanks for the opportunity, Sean. Talk to you and your listeners.
All right. Thanks, Scott. And thanks for listening to Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. To find out more, go to SolarSEAN.com and get yourself NABCEP certified. Wow.